this book, and I'll come to this in it, but he is a lonely only child, and I was a lonely only child, and he turned to art, and I turned to books. But also within that childhood was an amazing family, and everyone was an entrepreneur. So all my grandparents, all my aunts and uncles, all my cousins, everyone runs their own gig. I remember sitting everyone down, and they're all Dutch, like imagine the culture. I sit everyone down and say, I'm going to university to read law. And my mother cried. Everyone just looked at me like I'd just sort of killed the family dog. I remember this silence. My mum was like, it'll be a prison. It'll be a prison of black suits. It'll be prison. And then I remember coming home with my first paycheck and I was so excited, this blue slip. And I was like, look at this. And they were like, I bet you've got a holiday allowance. And it was this joke that I'd like abandoned entrepreneurship to go and do law. But the compromise was that I had to do something creative in the law. So I went to do a master's, and the deal was I had to do a module on art law. And my grandmother was an artist, and she did most of the raising of me. And that was the kind of the compromise. Anyway, turned out irritatingly, they were all correct. And that was the best bit. And so I ended up at Sotheby's doing art law, essentially fake thefts, forgeries, and family disputes, and had a whale of a time. But while I was there, the head of legal said, do you know what, Calandre? I'm just going to overstep here. He was about to retire, I think was just like, just sending out his wisdom, and said, where you're really good is speaking to commercial to creative and creative to commercial. I think you should go and do that. So I did, wrote lots of letters, and got one back from someone who said, you can come and make tea, basically. And actually, it was the best thing I've ever done, because that person was the interior designer, Rose Uniacke. And when I got there, nobody knew who she was. And by the chance of fate and her talent and her grit, by the time I left, it was huge. And she let me at everything. So I did that for a long time. And then I went freelance in 2015 and have been working with creative entrepreneurs ever since, doing just that, speaking creative to commercial and commercial to creative. For me, it's about some people need scaffolding and some people need to revisit their 7-year-old. And I think most people are on that seesaw, maybe it is, of, and in different seasons of your life, different things raise up. But I think most people that come to me are saying, I've gone too far one way or the other. Can you help me either build some scaffolding, or can you help me reconnect back with who I am and why I'm doing this? This chap has been quite an influence on me for quite a long time. The first bit I think is really important and is a conversation that I find people are really uncomfortable to have. And then once they've had it, they feel infinitely better, which is understanding who you are from childhood. Because I think whatever you're creating or selling, I'm afraid to say, whatever happened back then is still with you. So some people say, for instance, they grew up in an entrepreneurial house. They don't find it daunting. If you grew up in a house where your parents were both, I don't know, dentists, and you go off and be a sole trader and have to do a tax return and are terrified, it is different. And I think what's interesting in here is that I think he very self-consciously marks these three elements of his childhood. One is the being an only child, and he talks about that, I think, in a way that as an only child, I find really honest and fair, and it's not pitiful. It's just very straightforward. And so I really like that kind of honesty about turning to art as companionship. One of the other things he talks about is growing up on a geographical border. And so as a family, they would like drive to Germany to do their food shop because there was better apples there or whatever. And he learns all these languages. So he's learning German and French and Italian. And he says it in like this brutally short paragraph, which any Brit would just be like sweating at the idea of. And this idea of crossing borders as being really mundane. And so much of what he's done is about that international, and taking someone from here and putting them here makes them interesting. And whatever practice you're in, you have to cross borders, whether it's working style or approach or materiality or whatever. And I feel like he's just unafraid of crossing borders and learning new languages. And I think that in childhood is really powerful. The other thing he says is he was in I think it's a car crash, some sort of accident, and he ends up in hospital on death's door, I think. And he talks about how that gave him a sense of urgency. And I really like people with a sense of urgency. I think the people who understand themselves, so for instance, people who were praised for process or people who were praised for outcome or people who weren't praised at all, impacts how you run a business. What I think I like about him is he understands himself. So for instance, he is the only child who likes one-to-one. All the stuff he does in here, and he has this brilliant thing called the postcard stratagem, where he sits and writes 250 postcards to everyone he thinks is interesting and then starts visiting their studios. It's all one to one. So he's playing with who he is, not who someone else tells him he should be or what he's supposed to do. And we're always so often told, oh, you're supposed to do it like this, or you should do this, or this is how to network, or this is how to build a village. And he does it in his own way. And that's what I really like about that self-awareness and that understanding, explicit understanding, has impacted how he goes about doing things. And I think that's really valuable because that networking and that people, which is my second crucial thing, is that this lesson tells us is all about people at the end. It always comes back in the end to, I sat with so and so and they told me, or I sat with this person and they suggested, it's all about relationships. And he starts knowing no one. And so often people say, oh, I don't know the right person, or I don't, da, da, da. And he starts from zero and just doggedly, consistently, he builds his village and he's got an extraordinary city around him now. His first exhibition, I think, takes him 5 years, and then he puts one on in his kitchen. And he tells this brilliant story about how it was on for 30 days or 60 days or something. And every 3 days, one person would visit. But that person had the most extraordinary experience. And in a world that's telling us that numbers are more important than people and that, the experience is so powerful, and not forgetting the value of what that experience is, and whatever you're doing, is this experience extraordinary? Is that really stuck with me in terms of I need to take my own advice. And I feel like this guy's played the long game from the get-go. Somehow as a teenager, he played the long game from very young. What he does in this journey, in visiting studios and introducing people and putting on exhibitions and curating, is he's celebrating that tenacity and the grit and all those years of silence that it takes to really make something special. And I really like that he acknowledges talent, but it's not this like, oh, they're just talented, nor is it, oh, everyone can create, really. I like that those two have to sit together. They have to come alongside each other. And I feel like he speaks to that relationship really well. And there's something that I think my poor children will say, Mummy says this all the time, which is go to the warmth. The cool isn't that fun. Like,
Yes.
if you go to the
Yeah.
warmth, the people who
Ah,
genuinely think you're funny, the people who you share stuff with, they bring more warmth and more warmth and more warmth.
yeah.
And I think that's what this guy has done. I feel like you could draw a map of like, this is aging me, of like some Blue Peter map with pins in it, like from the war. But I mean, like that sense of like those lights of that thing you were saying, William, about how he met one person and they suggest the next person and they suggest the next person. That is the
Yes.
best filter of people, is like those introductions. You always end up that my favorite clients, and I'm not supposed to say it, they're always people who've come through word of mouth. Always. Because there's like a trust and a shared view or something always brings great people. My favorite bit in here is this concept you've said, actually, Will, about helping people and asking how you can be helpful. And he says this brilliant thing of um, he's meeting a particular artist, and this is relatively early on. And he said, he told me that people asked for more of the same, that the artists keep producing the same work, when it would be better to ask what it was the artist really wanted to do, or what project they had not yet carried out. This was his greatest gift to me, this idea of an unrealized project, to which I had much recourse subsequently, a project that was too big, too small, too expensive, too long to complete in a single lifetime, too utopian, one abandoned in a drawer or censored, a project that no one had dared to attempt. His idea was to ask what their unrealized project was and to help them realize it. And
Wow.
that advice became the guiding principle of my life.
Wow.
I just think that's extraordinary. We've all got something in a drawer. A, get it out the drawer. I'm quite prone to put things in a drawer, get things out the drawer. But also, it's asking other people what their unrealized project is.
Mm.
That's what I shall put on a t-shirt.